I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents. Is it a case of clerical bias? The nomination for the new congressional House Chaplain is held up over probing questions. Plus, Bishop DiMarzio tells us why Mary is so special to Catholics.
We honor Mary as the Mother of God, not just the Mother of Jesus, because if Jesus was God, then she's the Mother of God, and that's really misunderstood by many, many people.
And newly minted Catholics meet at St. James to continue their journey of faith.
I did receive the sacraments of baptism, communion, and confirmation, and that was a lot to process.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. In a rare instance of across-the-aisle harmony, Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner managed to actually agree on something. Just last week, the House Democratic leader and the Republican Speaker of the House endorsed Father Patrick Conroy in a joint announcement of his nomination to succeed the retiring Congressional House Chaplain. But faster than you can say debt ceiling, Nancy Pelosi had a swift change of heart. Pelosi sounded the alarm over Father Conroy's religious order, the Jesuits' Oregon Providence, which was ordered to pay out $166 million to sex abuse victims back in March. By late Wednesday this week, Pelosi withdrew her objections after Father Conroy responded to additional questions from her office. But in a new twist, Oregon Congressman Peter DeFazio, who himself is Catholic, is now the one calling for further examination of Father Conroy's past. So is this a cut and dry case of clerical bias? Boehner spokesman Michael Steele suggests the objections are fueled on guilt by association. Now the question is he right? Should the vote on Father Conroy's nomination, expected to be brought to the floor later this month, hang in the balance over the sins of his fellow priests? To talk about all this, I'm joined by Father James Martin, culture editor of America Magazine. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Father Jim.
My pleasure.
Well, first of all, is this in fact a case of guilt by association, or is it something else?
No, it is guilt by association. It is, to my mind, the worst kind of stereotyping. I mean, they're basically saying the people who oppose this nomination are basically saying all priests are pedophiles. I mean, I find it just infuriating. And Father Conroy is a good priest, an excellent priest, a priest in good standing. He was actually something of a whistleblower, about sex abuse in the priesthood, and I just think it's outrageous. I mean, does that mean that no Catholic priest can ever be chaplain in the Congress, or that no Catholic priest can be approved for anything because other Catholic priests were abusers? I think it's ridiculous.
Okay, well, you've said just now that he is a whistleblower himself, so tell me more about that. And also, is it fair to look into Conroy's past, as the Oregon congressman is suggesting, into whether or not he was in a supervisory capacity in his order and what he did or didn't know about any wrongdoing that may have occurred?
To the first question, I don't know too much about it. Just, Jesuits who told me that he was very sort of upfront about, voicing concerns when he saw something. And no, it's not appropriate to delve into his past because, any more that would be appropriate to, delve into my past because I wasn't a provincial, he wasn't a provincial, and it's complete guilt by association. I mean, it's basically saying, well, why don't we look at every single priest in the country and assume that they're pedophiles? I think it's ridiculous. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence at all that he was at all involved in any way in any of this stuff. And the idea that just because some of his brother priests were involved, means that he is guilty is terrible. I mean, it's stereotyping basically. All priests are pedophiles. I mean, and all Jesuits therefore, must be suspect. So I think it's really ridiculous. And I mean, as you can tell by my voice, I think it's outrageous.
Yeah, certainly. You seem quite outraged by it. So and fairly so, coming from your position. Now, the statement from John Boehner's office suggests that the objections to Father Conroy's nomination are a clear-cut case of anti-priest bias. And so what do you think then is fueling that call to investigate Father Conroy's past? What is it about this?
Yeah, well, I think what happened was basically Nancy Pelosi's office, and I respect Nancy Pelosi, heard that he was a member of the Oregon Province, which paid out $166 million in, abuse settlements. But I think a quick phone call, to Father Conroy would have cleared up the fact that A, he was not one of those people named. B, he's never been accused of anything. And C, he was not someone who's been overseeing people. I think the disturbing thing is that it means that every priest is guilty by association, and it's just as wrong to stereotype priests as it is to stereotype women or blacks or Jews or gays. I mean, it's basically saying all priests are to be suspect, which I think is terrible. And I especially am angry that it's it's against a Jesuit brother. And the Oregon province has been very sort of disclosive, and there's no reason for people to investigate him in that way. I mean, I think a general investigation, that you would investigate, all people that are working for Congress in terms of a background check makes sense. But to look at him specifically for pedophilia or abuse is ridiculous.
And don't you really think that the message out there is that there are a lot of good priests out there, and things like this just sort of continue to put a pallor over a situation that, doesn't apply to everyone?
Well, and the irony is apparently the message is not out there, because if Nancy Pelosi, who I assume is Catholic, is suspecting a person just because he's a priest, then I guess the message is not out there. I think that the tenor in society is changing to being completely suspicious of all priests, and it's guilty until proven innocent, which is really the opposite of our American justice system.
Well, given that, what do you think needs to be done to actually correct that perception, perhaps?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, I think that this is not to diminish the terror and the horror of sex abuse, within the priesthood, but we still have to remember that I think the highest number that I have seen is something like 5%. I mean, even if you go up to 6%, that still means that 94% of priests are good, healthy, productive priests. I don't know what you can do for this. I think that combating it is one way to sort of deal with it. I think, coming out very strongly against stuff like precisely like this is really important, and to sort of be very upfront about these things.
All right. Well, Father James Martin with America Magazine, we appreciate your comments on this important subject today.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead. A Long Island high school is in hot water over a prom debate. We'll have the latest on that and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, we'll catch up with some of Brooklyn's newest Catholics. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Retaliation in Pakistan for the death of Osama bin Laden, with at least 80 people killed in a suicide bombing. CNN's Stan Grant has the story from Islamabad.
The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for this attack today and linked it directly to the killing of Osama bin Laden. It's also warning of more attacks to come. This is a significant moment. Of course, there have been fears of such retaliation, and now we've seen this in this district, Charsara, in the northern part of Pakistan, up near the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. 2 suicide bombers have attacked and targeted specifically a military training facility. Recruits have been training there for the past 9 months. They'd finished that training program in the early hours of the morning. The 2 men on the back of motorcycles struck, detonating the bombs, killing a huge number of people. Scores more have been injured as well and taken to hospital. Looking at pictures coming in from the region, it is an area of complete devastation. Houses have been blown apart, cars have been upturned. We've seen dead bodies being dragged away from the scene, people grieving over those bodies, and scores of others who've been ferried to hospitals for injuries and wounds coming from this attack. Now, this area is a hotbed of insurgency. It has been for some time, particularly for Taliban and Al-Qaeda-linked militants who go there to hide out, to regroup. The military has been conducting operations there for some years, trying to root out this insurgency, but once again seeing how potent the militants can be, and they are once again targeting the military themselves.
Well, that is CNN's Stan Grant reporting. Closer to home, New York City's police department foiled a plot to blow up a Manhattan synagogue. CNN's Samantha Hayes has that story.
After a 7-month investigation, New York police Wednesday arrested 2 men suspected of plotting an attack on a synagogue.
Fortunately, long before their aspirations could take hold, New York City police officers were watching them and were in a position to take them into custody before they could maim and murder innocent New Yorkers.
Officials say the men, residents of Queens who immigrated to the U.S. from Algeria and Morocco, were planning to disguise themselves as Jewish temple goers in order to gain entrance to a synagogue and leave a bomb. New York investigators say the two are not connected to al-Qaeda or a terrorist cell.
We are concerned about lone wolves acting against New York City in the wake of the killing of bin Laden, and that's why the case before us today is so important.
Also Thursday, in an effort to prevent disruption in the fight against terrorism, President Obama announced he's asking Robert Mueller to stay on as director of the FBI for 2 more years, having already served the mandatory term limit of 10 years.
It is a testament to Director Mueller's remarkable service and commitment to this country that after a 10-year term, during one of the most difficult periods in this nation's history, that he has been willing to serve for an additional 2 years.
And that report from CNN's Samantha Hayes. Well, Spain's crown prince and princess attended a funeral for victims of an earthquake that struck the city of Lorca earlier this week. The prince and princess spoke with the families of those victims. The funeral mass was held at a trade center in Lorca, part of which has been converted to a shelter for some of the 3,000 people left homeless. The magnitude 5.2 earthquake is Spain's deadliest in more than 50 years. The Vatican Secretary of State has sent a telegram of condolence to the local bishop in Spain on behalf of Pope Benedict. And today, the Vatican released a new document on the Latin Mass. The document makes clear that the Latin Mass should be made available to those who want it. The document also states that the form of the Mass was never done away with, and priests do not need special permission to celebrate it. However, priests must be able to pronounce the Latin correctly and understand its meaning in order to celebrate the Mass. Well, the human rights organization Amnesty International has given the Vatican a failing grade. In its report on human rights and concerns in 2010, Amnesty criticized the Vatican, saying that it has failed to address sex abuse by clergy that occurred over the past decades. Catholic League President Bill Donohue slammed that report, pointing out, among other things, that all other countries listed were cited for incidents that occurred in 2010. Donohue says the Vatican was the only country in which past decades of abuse were examined. Well, a group of Christian leaders in China is calling on the government there to end persecution of China's underground churches. 19 pastors signed a petition which calls for legal protection for underground churches. The pastors also want an investigation into the case of one underground church whose leaders have been under house arrest for more than a month. Well, back in this country, Georgia's governor has signed what is being branded an Arizona-style immigration measure into law. The legislation gives police the power to check the immigration status of certain suspects. It also makes it a felony to give false information when applying for a job and penalizes people who knowingly transport illegal immigrants. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports the law is partly based on a similar one signed last year in Arizona. The U.S. Bishops' Conference called Arizona's law draconian. And closer to home, a Catholic high school on Long Island is catching lots of heat after telling a female student that she could not bring her former girlfriend to the prom. The school's principal told NBC that allowing the female student to bring another female would send a mixed message. He said the Catholic faith specifies that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that the school's policies on dating must reflect that as well. Well, best feature story, best front page, best photograph. It is an annual newspaper awards ceremony, but the winners do not work for the Daily News or the Post. They are students at Catholic high schools in the Brooklyn Diocese, and they were recognized by the diocese's own newspaper, The Tablet. We sent our cameras to this year's ceremony at St. Francis College in Brooklyn Heights.
The Tablet has been honoring student journalists for more than 30 years. It's part of our ministry as journalists to encourage the next generation.
We sit down and we read them all, and then we talk about them, and we debate them. So, we really enjoy doing this every year for the high school students.
We started out with a guest journalist, Gina Salomone, who is a features reporter for the New York Daily News. After she addressed the students and answered some of their questions, we moved on to the luncheon portion of the afternoon, and then we had the awards ceremony when students received their much anticipated awards.
You want to make sure that they have a sense of the journalistic style. There's a certain way of writing a newspaper story. It's not the same as writing a term paper.
The winners tell the best stories. They capture the who, what, where, when, why, and how of their school communities.
I see a lot of kids who have a good sense of how to use words, and they've made great strides in how they design their newspapers, and the topics that they cover are very challenging.
I won 4 awards. I expected maybe to get 1 for maybe my Marie article.
This was my first year as editor-in-chief of the paper, so I'm really happy that I led the team to our big victory.
I would love to be a journalist.
I'm not considering going into journalism, but I definitely do want to continue writing.
Winning the awards definitely makes me feel like I'm on the right track because it shows that, I can get noticed.
It's really nice to get an award, but in the end, that's not really what counts. They're valued for what they do, and this is that little pat on the back that they may not get otherwise.
Kudos to them, and that recognition is well deserved. Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead. Coming up next, we go into the deep with Bishop DiMarzio to learn all about Mary.
Immaculate Conception is Mary's conception, not Jesus' conception. So that's where there's a confusion.
Welcome back. Well, one of the things that distinguishes Catholics from other Christian groups is their well-noted and very popular devotion to the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus. But as devoted as many of the Catholic faithful may be, there are still many questions about Mary. Do Catholics worship her? Is she a saint? Is she really everyone's mother? Well, to discover the answer to those questions and more, Matt recently waded into the deep with Brooklyn's Bishop DiMarzio, a well-known devotee of the Virgin Mary himself, to learn why Mary is so significant to the Catholic faithful.
Bishop DiMarzio, thanks for being here again. We appreciate your time.
Always be here.
Well, this, of course, is the month of May, the month of Mary, and we wanted to kind of get out in the streets and find out what questions people might have for you about Mary. So we've got actually a clip here for you to watch and a couple of questions there from parishioners. So let's check that out.
I guess maybe more about her relationship with Joseph.
I would ask the bishop how he felt about Mary's influence on many, many people.
What does the Marian year mean?
During his teenage years, I would just like to hear a bit more about how life would have been as a mother of Christ, but also as a mother.
How does someone become so faithful? And did she know Jesus' full role when the angel came to her? How do you bring up a child knowing that?
The Immaculate Conception is approximately 20 to 40 days before Christmas, something like that. So I'd be interested in understanding the reasoning behind that, how that happens, because obviously not a full term.
All right, well, some interesting questions there. I know you want to tackle that last one first.
Yes, I think so. There's a real misunderstanding. The Immaculate Conception is Mary's conception, not Jesus' conception. So that's where there's a confusion, and people are confused about that.
Yeah, a little misunderstanding there, but a little bit of an easy explanation for that.
Right, that's the easiest question. But they're very good questions.
Right, right, and I think the one that kind of stood out. I'll get my. I would say you would think that I didn't speak English, but I have all my life. I promise. Did Mary know her full role, and kind of how do you raise a child knowing that he's the savior of all mankind?
It's a debated question, and it really has to do also with the consciousness of Jesus, of his own divinity. And we don't know the answer to the question. There's a lot of conjecture, a lot of thinking about it, and did Jesus know when he was a baby that he was God? Probably not. We think that his normal growth as a person would also be the same growth he had in his self-understanding. Would Mary have known? Probably not. Again, the apocryphal Gospels give us a lot of stories that are apocryphal. We don't give much credence to them, but we see Jesus performing miracles as a child, and so that Mary might have known. We don't think so. The process, as we see even in the 3 years of Jesus' public ministry, he comes to that realization ever more strongly that he is the Son of God. He starts talking about that. For the Jews to claim that you're the Son of God is just blasphemy to say that. So obviously that's his consciousness came to that point. He recognized and realized that he really was the Son of God. So I think Mary probably, along with that, would have known it when he knew it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and one of the other questions had to deal with Mary's influence on not only, I guess, the people that, of course, she came in contact with during her life,
Right.
but she's someone who's had such an influence on so many people, and I think that part of the Catholic faith is something that's often misunderstood.
Right. Well, clearly we honor Mary as the mother of God, not just the mother of Jesus, because if Jesus was God, then she's the mother of God, and that's really misunderstood by many, many people. But we recognize it's kind of almost the maternal aspect of God that is seen in Mary. She's not God, we know that, but it gives us that motherly care and affection that we know God has for us, and it's personified in Mary, and people relate to that. Sure. You know, I think when we're in trouble, we call for our mothers, and even if we're a little child or even older, that kind of, you know, motherly care and affection, we need it, we want it. And I think when we think in the same way of Mary, we call Mary when we need a mother.
Sure. One of the other questions in there was about the Marian year and what that is all about.
Well, every once in a while, the Holy Father might declare a Marian year. It would be a year when we concentrate our attention on our devotion to Mary, but they're not too frequent. The holy years, every 25 years, Marian year would be occasionally that might happen.
Sure, sure. Well, one last question here for you before we wrap it up. What is, in a nutshell, a dogma, and what are the Marian dogmas?
Well, a dogma is a teaching of the Church in which we are to believe. It's part of our faith, and certainly the Immaculate Conception would be a dogma of faith, that Mary was conceived without sin, the assumption that Mary was assumed into heaven, body and soul. We're not really sure if she ever died, but the assumption we're clear about. Those are two Marian dogmas that would be clearly something we believe in.
Sure. All right. Well, Bishop DiMarzio, I like these. I like doing these questions from parishioners. I think it's very fun.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot for being
You're
in.
welcome.
We appreciate it.
You can learn a lot by watching Currents. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents straight ahead. And welcome home. The newly baptized shared their stories of faith.
When I was younger, I didn't realize what faith was really about. So I really feel at this time I'm really home.
And finally tonight, thousands of men, women, and children were welcomed into the Catholic Church during Easter Vigil Masses held all around the world. And the scene was no different in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Converts and catechumens received the sacraments that would make them fully initiated members of the Church. But their initiation was only the beginning of their journey. This Tuesday, these newly minted Catholics, now known as neophytes, gathered with Bishop DiMarzio at St. James Cathedral to reaffirm their connection to the Church, their union with the bishop, and best of all, share their inspiring stories of faith.
I didn't expect to feel what I felt. I was crying through the whole thing. It was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life.
There's so much more to learn. I can't wait to learn more, because I want to teach my children.
I can only describe it as such a beautiful and humbling experience.
Tonight's Mass is one of the traditional things that has been part of Christian initiation from the very early years of the Church, where the neophytes, these new converts, are brought together. They witness to what happened to them at Easter, and they are able to deepen the mystery. May this water remind us of our baptism, and let us share the joy of all who have been baptized at Easter.
I did receive the sacraments of baptism, communion, and confirmation. And yes, that was a lot to process. But at the same time, I was very grateful to do it as an adult and in a very slow and reflective way.
A series of events in my life over the last few years
brought me to the doors of St. Patrick's in Bay Ridge. I had my own set of questions I knew would need to be worked through if I was going to move sincerely through the process of joining the church.
For me, it's been a long journey. I got away from the church for about 20 years, and little by little, I've come back home, and I'm really blessed, and it's a gift. When I was younger, I didn't realize what faith was really about, so I really feel at this time I'm really home.
Conversion is not a one-time event. It happens once, but it continues. It's a lifelong journey. And so for the neophytes, they're beginners at it. We want them to be experts after a while. So that's why we continue to encourage them and ask God's grace for them.
I was born to a Jewish mother and a Catholic father, and I was raised Jewish. I was bris, bar mitzvahed. It was just I was always searching for something more. I always felt something in the church. I couldn't explain it. I was too young. Finally, when I got a little older, I just kind of felt like, I think I'm going to convert soon. My mom was pretty much, if you feel God in that way, then I'm all for it. That's the most important thing to have God in your life, no matter how it is.
Now, as on April 23rd on Easter Vigil, I find a new light in my life. I find a gift of a new beginning, a clean slate, somewhere to begin new, to forgive, to love, and it comes from my heart.
Just to see the changes, see people's searchings, and see them discovering God working in their lives. It's really a wonderful experience.
It's been a long journey, I guess, coming into the Catholic faith and making my decision to do it. My wife's been Catholic her whole life. I came from a Protestant family, sort of fell out of religion in general.
When he was baptized at the Easter Vigil, right after he was baptized, we baptized his baby. And the smile on Rudy's face was just overwhelming. It was so beautiful.
Right now it's taking everything in, sort of meditating and staying in prayer and keeping the family fully united.
I believe his love will guide me to continue believing in him, loving him, and walking in his path.
Wow, what a powerful and transformative experience. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. It really has been a heck of a lot of fun to come back for a few days and host the show with you, but as much as I have missed you, and I don't know, maybe you've missed me a little bit too, I'm not sure, the wait is over. Matt McClure will be back on set this Monday bringing you the latest news from the lens of faith. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net, and we are also on Twitter and on Facebook, so you can find us there. So for all of us here at Currents, I'm Francesca Maxime. Have a great night and enjoy your weekend.